Picture a business that loses money almost every year, pays its owners no dividends, needs hundreds of millions re-injected annually with no guaranteed return, and can see its market value collapse overnight because of a single result. If I pitched you this as an investment, you'd say no in the first minute. And yet, right now, more than 345 football clubs worldwide sit inside multi-club ownership networks, fed by billionaires, sovereign wealth funds, and entire governments pouring in tens of billions of dollars. A decade ago, that number was under 60. And as we speak, one case has been hanging unresolved for over 3 years. A case that could strip one of the greatest clubs of the modern era of dozens of points overnight. And nobody knows when or how it will end. The question today isn't how are clubs run? It's something far more dangerous. Why do the most powerful men and the most powerful states on earth keep buying clubs that barely turn a profit? Today I'm going to show you how football, the most popular sport on the planet, became one of the most sophisticated tools of political and financial influence in the modern world. A tool that doesn't just buy you a club, it buys your image in front of billions of people. Since the 1930s, political scientists have used the term soft power to describe a state's ability to influence others without coercion, through culture, image, and attraction, rather than military or economic force. Football, watched by more than 3.5 billion people, is simply the most efficient soft power channel humans have ever built. No embassy, no ad campaign puts a country's name in front of that many eyes, every single week. Academics studying what they call the geopolitical economy of football define the more controversial term here, sportswashing, as individuals, organizations, or regimes using sporting teams or events to improve their public image. But here's the important part. Not every scholar agrees this framework even fits. Other serious research has openly asked whether sportswashing is the right lens at all, or whether the motive, in many cases, is simply much blunter than that: money. I'll show you both sides, starting with the most famous case in the world. In 2008, the Abu Dhabi United group, owned by a member of the UAE's ruling family, bought a mid-table English club that hadn't won the league in decades. Inside 15 years, that club became the dominant force in English football, 8 league titles out of 13, and its first ever Champions League trophy in 2023. But in February 2023, the Premier League formally charged the club with 115 breaches of its financial rules between 2009 and 2018, most of them tied to how commercial sponsorship deals were recorded. The club denies every single charge. The case went to an independent commission, which held a 12-week hearing that closed in December 2024. And as of the moment this video was recorded, the commission still hasn't ruled. No acquittal, no guilty verdict. The club keeps playing, the fans keep singing, and in the background sits a set of possible sanctions that, according to financial experts, could range from a fine to a points deduction severe enough, some say up to 40 or more points, to relegate the club regardless of anything that happens on the pitch. This loop is genuinely still open, right now, as you watch this. In 2021, the same story played out again, at a different club. Saudi Arabia's public investment fund bought a majority stake in Newcastle United. The deal triggered immediate global controversy. Amnesty International publicly called it an attempted sportswashing exercise, while the Premier League officially approved it after receiving what it described as legally binding assurances separating the fund's operations from the state itself. And Newcastle was only step one. The very next year, the same sovereign fund launched an entirely new global golf tour to rival the established one, making the bigger picture clear. Buying one club was never the end goal. It was one piece of a much larger strategy to reshape the map of global sport itself. But soft power cuts both ways, and the clearest proof of that happened in London, not the Gulf. In 2003, Russian businessman Roman Abramovich bought Chelsea and, within a few years, turned it into a European powerhouse. 4 league titles and 2 Champions League trophies. Then, in March 2022, just weeks after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the UK government formally placed Abramovich under sanctions. The result was immediate and unprecedented. Every one of his assets frozen, including the club itself, forcing a sale within a matter of weeks to a new ownership consortium. The proceeds, roughly £2.5 billion, remain frozen to this day, earmarked, at least in theory, for humanitarian causes tied to the war in Ukraine. This story reveals the exact opposite side of the equation. When geopolitics turns against an owner, the club itself flips overnight from a tool of influence into a political hostage, regardless of anything happening on the field. And just recently, Chelsea itself paid a £10 million fine after its new ownership voluntarily self-reported suspicious payments dating back to the Abramovich era. Proof that the files from that period are still being reopened, years after it formally ended. Because the popular narrative always zeroes in on Gulf funds and Russian oligarchs, most people miss the bigger wave entirely: American capital. Today, American entities hold majority control of nearly half the Premier League's clubs alone, according to financial analysts. Firms like Redbird Capital, Clear Lake, and Fenway Sports Group entered the market, not chasing political image, but because they saw European clubs as, in the words of financial analysts, undervalued assets inside a fast-growing global entertainment industry. That's a crucial distinction worth sitting with. The motive here is usually purely financial, not political, but the real-world outcome looks strikingly similar either way. Power concentrating into fewer and fewer hands, whether the buyer is a state chasing image or a fund chasing return. And here's where it gets more complicated. One single group, tied to the same ownership behind Manchester City, owns or co-owns 13 clubs spread across 5 continents. This model, known as multi-club ownership, allows shared scouting networks, player rotation between clubs, and even internally coordinated transfers. According to UEFA's latest report, by the end of 2025, more than 345 clubs worldwide belong to a multi-club ownership structure, up from under 60 just a decade earlier. UEFA itself has officially warned that this model has the potential to pose a material threat to the integrity of European competitions, especially when 2 clubs from the same network end up facing each other in the same tournament. And not every one of these networks is glamorous or successful. One of the largest multi-club groups in America, which held stakes in several European and American clubs at once, collapsed entirely after becoming the subject of an active fraud investigation, and was forced to transfer all its assets to a different creditor within a matter of months. Players and coaches woke up one morning to find the club they played for effectively had no clear owner at all. There's a newer, far less famous angle here too, one researchers only raised this year. What if soft power isn't always a deliberate choice, by anyone in particular? Some very recent academic work proposes a new concept: involuntary sportswashing, a situation where an entire sporting institution becomes captured by a host state's or major sponsor's agenda, not through any single intentional decision, but through an accumulation of individually reasonable commercial choices. A sponsorship deal here, a broadcast partnership there, that together produce the exact same effect, without anyone ever explicitly planning it. In other words, even without a stated intention, major sporting institutions can end up serving as someone else's influence tool, purely because of how financially dependent they've become on them. So why do the most powerful men and the most powerful states on Earth keep buying clubs that barely turn a profit? Because the real return was never measured in profit to begin with. It's measured in something far harder to quantify and far more dangerous: legitimacy, access, free global attention every single week, and millions of fans who will defend that crest with everything they've got, regardless of who's actually standing behind it. And I'll leave you with one question. I'm deliberately not going to answer. The next time you put on your club's shirt, do you actually know who you're advertising for? And does it even matter to you, as long as the team keeps winning? The moment a verdict drops on those 115 charges, I'll be back with a full breakdown of exactly what it means. Whatever the panel decides for the entire future of English football. Stay close to this channel because this story isn't closed yet. Not on the pitch and not in court.